afternoon, everybody. I'm Trish Safner. I'm in the Thompsonville Community Garden, and this afternoon we're going to talk about the special care of warm season plants. Warm season plants are typically planted after the last frost. The reason for that is that they have special cultural needs, and in Connecticut, because we have a varying frost year to year, it's important to watch the weather and make sure that the temperatures during the daytime are over 55 to 60 and to make sure that there's no frost predicted. The warm season crops we're going to talk about today are in the tomato family: tomatoes, peppers, and eggplants. We're going to talk about squash, pumpkins, and beans. We're going to talk about my favorite companion plants, which are basil, dill, nasturtium, marigolds, and sunflowers. So each of these is generally planted after the last frost. In this area, it tends to be the second to third week in May. Sometimes people can plant earlier, but they have to take special care to make sure that the plants are covered if it's going to be a night of possible frost. So if you're watching the weather, you put your plants in early May and you see that the weather prediction for the night is going to be 35 degrees or colder, you need to come to the garden and make sure that you cover those plants with something like a plastic bag or a very lightweight sheet or an upside down milk jug, and keep that covered, and then return in the morning to take that off so that intense temperature underneath the covering doesn't damage your plants during the daytime. But once you get beyond the last frost and you get into later May, it's really safe to plant all these plants. I generally recommend that you wait until the end of May to plant your tomatoes, and in June plant your eggplant and your peppers and your beans. They tend to need warm soil temperatures above 60 degrees, and sometimes with the fluctuating temperatures and daytime temps, you may not get that warm soil temperature, especially if we have a cloudy, cool spring. So once you get beyond June, you're safe to put all these things in the ground. If you're planting seeds such as beans and sunflower, and we've had a really long, cool, cloudy spell, your seeds may not germinate. They may actually rot in the soil. So you need to check on them and possibly replant them if they haven't germinated in a week or so. I do recommend companion planting with your plants. Because these are warm season plants, and Connecticut typically doesn't have a really truly long warm season, we have to manipulate things a little bit to help things grow better. So I recommend companion planting. What that is planting herbs and flowers right alongside your vegetables. What this does is it creates a wonderful smell and aroma for you to enjoy and eat, as well as keep pests away and invite beneficial insects. We'll be talking about bugs of all kinds, good bugs, bad bugs, later in the summer when they tend to be around more. But I generally recommend planting the herbs and flowers when you plant your vegetables, and it helps prevent problems later on in the season. Very important watering techniques with your warm season crops. As the seasons progress and your plants are really enjoying the weather in June and July, the leaves are getting larger, they become a great surface for moisture to sit on. So when you're watering, you want to make sure that you're watering right at the root level, right at the soil, because that is where the nutrients and the water will be taken up by the plants through the root system. The water on top of leaves just causes moisture and invites pests and fungus to grow. And later in the summer, as we get into the humid temperatures, that becomes a problem, especially in squash and tomato plants. So special care for tomatoes is at planting time. When you're planting, you want to space at least 2 to 3 feet between each tomato plant to allow for air circulation around it and for the growth above it. As we get into the growing, you'll be thinning the plant and making sure that, again, good air circulation and sunlight is able to get to all parts of the plant. With the squash, it's a vining crop along with tomatoes, so we tend to grow them upright on some type of trellis. Again, that helps with air circulation and prevents a lot of water sitting on top of the leaves. Mulch is also a good idea when we're talking about warm season crops. Because of the fluctuating climate and weather conditions, we never know whether we're going to get an excess of rain or be in a drought situation. So the mulch is a great way to protect and preserve retain moisture around the plants. Also planting your companion planting, particularly your herbs, parsley, basil, around the base creates almost like a nice mulched area. It helps retain nutrients and moisture around your plants and helps keeps the pests away. I like to concentrate on companion planting and talk about the specific plants going along with each of our warm season crops, starting with the tomatoes and peppers and eggplants. I generally recommend basil, parsley, asters, cosmos, and marigolds for flowers. The reason for those are they have a strong smell and it confuses the pests that are coming in looking for the smell of your particular tomato and pepper plants. For the squash family, dill and borage is best for herbs, and nasturtiums and sunflowers. For the bean family, dill, calendula, cosmos, and daisies. And getting into more of the mulch, we talked about chopped leaves as a possibility, and also chopped clean grass clippings. Getting into watering, just some specifics. Watering times that are best for your plants is early morning and mid-afternoon. The reason for that is it allows the daytime temperatures and the heating to dry any water that might have gotten on the leaves, especially if there was rain overnight and you've got wet leaves. It allows the daytime to dry those leaves. The plants generally need an inch per week. So watch the weather, see what kind of rain conditions are predicted, and then supplement to reach your inch. A particular note are beans. They are the vegetable that needs the most water out of all the plants in the summertime, surprisingly, and they need at least half an inch a day. So pay particular attention to your bean plants. The most crucial times of the growing season for watering are just before flowering and fruiting. So another good thing is to come to the garden often, watch to see how your plants are growing. If it looks like they're going to be flowering soon, that's a very important time to do some watering. So now we're going to actually go into the garden beds and take a look at tomato and squash plants so I can talk about the specific care of each of these plants. Okay, I am sitting here on one of the garden beds in Thompsonville. I've chosen this bed to talk about tomato plants. The reason why I chose this bed is it shows the growth of the tomato. It's probably doubled in size since it was planted a couple of weeks ago. I like this bed because it's showing really good spacing between the tomato plants. You can see there's a tremendous amount of air space around the tomato plant. She has it staked and ready to support it as it grows. And so this will help prevent disease. So spacing the plants 2 to 3 feet apart is important, allowing it to be supported on a trellis as it grows. As this plant gets to be about the height of the top of this trellis, what I'm going to recommend is that the gardener come along and remove the stems that are in the bottom 12 inches of the plant. And the reason for that is that as she waters or as rain comes, the rain will splash onto the soil and will get up onto the plant on the stems and on the leaves, and that's make it more susceptible for plant disease. So that's how the disease is spread through the soil. So if you have just the stalk or the stem, there's no way that the soil-borne disease can get up on the plant. So as this plant continues to grow, I will recommend that not only you remove the excess foliage down at the bottom, but we're also going to recommend removing suckering. And suckering is shown where the main branch and the stem join. Another little stem is coming out, and what that is going to do is just put more stress on the plant to put energy into making this grow. So what we want to do is remove all the suckers at the junction of the main stem and the smaller stems. That way the plant concentrates the energy into keeping it healthy and then putting it into flowering and later fruiting. The other thing is watering, as I said, watering at the root level, keeping companion plants or some kind of mulch down at the bottom to keep the moisture retained. We also want to choose varieties that are less disease ridden. Also avoid excess nitrogen or over-fertilization. We don't need to do it here in these beds because we have wonderful Collins compost here, but if you're gardening at home, you might have heard that tomatoes need a tremendous amount of fertilization. That is true, they do, but if you over-fertilize, you actually make the plant more pest friendly, and it will zero in on your plant because it actually becomes weak from too much nitrogen. The other recommendation that I give during the season is if you see any brown or dead leaves on your plant, to come and remove those and discard them. Don't just let them fall at the bottom. The garden debris for any plant down at the bottom with any kind of browning or diseased leaves or stems, again, invites pests or soil-borne diseases to come to that plant and then further go up the plant and cause problems. So cleaning up around your plant is also very important. And you'll also see that she also has some companion plants here. She has alyssum, purple alyssum in the middle, and she has the marigolds on either side. Again, that's bringing in a nice smell, and it's confusing the pests and keeping the garden a lot healthier. I'm going to just tell you several of the problems that happen with tomato plants during the season. The reason why these problems happen is because our varying weather conditions, as I spoke with earlier, with excess water followed by drought. The excess changing in the weather will cause stress to the plants. And as a result of this variable weather conditions and planting in cool conditions or problems with the weather, it stresses out the plant and makes it more susceptible to disease later on in the summer. And so those problems would include early blight, late blight, septaria leaf spot, blossom failure and blossom end rot, sun scald, and growth cracks. So these are conditions that happen to a stressed plant. These are all things that you can look up on the internet. I'll speak about them later on in the season as we get into the summertime. But those are things to keep in mind. Again, if you do the proper techniques of keeping your plant healthy early and looking for any signs of pests or problems, removing any garden debris, removing excess foliage on here, these are all things that will help secure a healthy and productive tomato plant. In follow-up of the discussion on tomatoes, I have some information that I will be leaving in the Thompsonville Community Garden shed. It talks about all the common problems that I just talked about on tomatoes. It gives you pictures and a nice little description of it. And this will be in the shed for reference to gardeners so that they can look at their plants, try to identify what it is, go to the shed and actually see what the problem is and how to take care of it. That's one of the benefits of having a Yukon Master Gardener in your garden. I'll be able to update you with any problems that I'm notified about through the Yukon Master Gardener program. It also has a nice sheet on late blight, which is always a concern for every gardener of tomatoes, and that will be in the shed as well. Now moving on to squash. I just have a couple things to say about squash. I do not generally recommend planting squash in community beds. The reason for that is it is a vining crop, and it generally will take over the whole bed all by itself. And what happens is, because it takes over the whole bed and it has such large leaves, it tends to be prone to having a lot of leaf diseases. It also is a great host for squash bugs, and squash bugs generally come early in the summertime, and if you're not vigilant in looking at your plants, you can have your whole plant destroyed by them. So I do not generally recommend squash plants. I recommend that you go to your local farmer's market and support your local farmer, and he will be producing it having no problem at all. And I believe Wednesday afternoons over by the town hall is where the farmer's market is in Enfield. So I strongly urge you to support your local farmer's market. But for the gardeners at home who are gardening with squash, the particular problems happen, as I said, inside the stems and on the leaves because the leaves become so big. We're looking at this plant. It already has signs of stress on it. It's got some browning and some yellowing. It actually does have some fruiting going on. You can see this is a female flower that's already decided to fruit, and so this is a yellow zucchini. And to keep this healthy, what it needs is a lot of room to spread, a little bit of mulch around it to support moisture. But most importantly, you need to come along and look at the bottom side of the leaves every week to see if the squash bug adults have deposited eggs. The interesting thing about the eggs is they're bright orange and they are formed in lines similar to the lines on a flag. So the very distinct pattern, if you do see that, you remove the whole leaf with the eggs, destroy it in the trash. If you don't, and those eggs become young insects, they'll take over, they'll eat your plant, and they'll also make it more hospitable for other diseases to come along. So I do recommend eating squash, very healthy, but get it at your local farmer's market. Thanks and have a great afternoon. See you in the garden.